Hello, I am Brandon. I'm going to help go through GitHub to help you organize your project.
And I'm Aaron. I'm going to first discuss how GitHub works, then once Brandon walks you through the initial setup, I'll talk about how to add your project to your GitHub repo and how to push any changes you make to it. Before we show you what using GitHub will look like, we wanted to first explain how it works. GitHub is basically a cloud service that lets multiple people work together on a digital project. Another example of a cloud service you might be familiar with is Google Drive, a place where multiple people can store and share digital information. When you use GitHub, you can make changes to your group's project from your own individual computer, then push those changes to GitHub's remote repository where they can be combined with the changes made by your teammates. GitHub also makes it easier to revert your project to a previous version if new changes end up breaking it or making it unusable. Now let's get into the diagram. Here, we have GitHub's cloud, where all of the data from everyone using GitHub is stored. This part, jutting out, represents your own slice of that cloud, your repository or repo. The section labeled main is basically the current version of your project with all of yours and your teammates' changes integrated into it. Now let's jump out to the edges of the diagram, to these little leaves. These represent everything on your computer, all the pictures, documents, videos, and other digital files you can add to your project. The ones that are highlighted with the blue color are files that you've connected to the GitHub Desktop App. GitHub Desktop allows you to push all the files from your computer into your main project by creating and managing these so-called branches. Main is considered a branch as well, but for the purposes of explaining how this works, think of main as more of the trunk of the GitHub tree here. When you make changes to your project, it's important to make your own branch first. That way, if your changes don't work out, the main branch won't be affected. The first and most important thing you'll want to remember when making your branch is that you must pull from main to create it. When you pull from main to create your branch, you're basically creating a copy of whatever the current main branch has. You'll notice that when you create a branch that's connected to the files on your computer, you'll also create a remote branch that's part of your repo in the GitHub cloud. Whatever files you add or change in your branch, you have to push them into your remote branch before they can be combined with the main branch. The reason both your branch and your remote branch have dotted lines describing the pushing and pulling of data is because these branches are not supposed to be open all the time. You only want to create your own branch during each time you sit down to work on the project. After you're done and you merge your branch with the main branch, you must delete it. I'll get into the specifics of why that's important as I show you what it'll look like doing all this yourself. To get to the GitHub website, all you have to do is go up to your address bar in your Internet Explorer and type github.com. That's github.com. And it should take you right here.
All right, we are here on the GitHub page, so we need to make an account. Let's go to the top right and click on Sign Up. All right, so it's going to prompt us to import some of our information. Enter your email. Let's do your email. This is an example here. So go ahead and put in your email here. And make sure you put in a password. Then next there'll be a username. This is not available, so let's just do that. And would you like to do products? You probably just want to do no. And then you're going to do your puzzle. Start puzzle. Push the Spiral Galaxy. Go ahead and pick the right one. And then create an account. So then you are going to click on this and your account will have been created. Alright, before we get into the GitHub stuff, we also want to download GitHub Desktop. So just go to Google, search up download GitHub Desktop, and it's going to be your first non-add on there. So desktop.github.com. Going to click on this link. It'll bring us here. Okay, perfect. So there's this download for Windows. So going to click on that, and it'll prompt to download. Go ahead and open when done. Then once it's finished downloading here, you're just going to click on the OK on the prompts and just hit next. All right, so it's finished installing or finished downloading, so I was going to do that. And I had already done it downloaded, so it just opened up for me. But just go ahead and if there's any other prompts, just go ahead and just click OK on them, and we'll deal with this stuff. Okay, so now that we have GitHub Desktop downloaded, let's look at creating a repo. So you can do this a couple of ways. We can go to the left here, just on the github.com, our homepage. It says repositories, new. We can create a new one. Additionally, if we go to our profile, top right, it'll say your repositories. So you can click here. You can do new as well. So there's a lot of different repositories we can do. So from this page, we have our create a new repository. So let's just fill in the information. Repository name, this could be whatever you want it to be. I'm just going to call it test repo 2, I guess. Say this is a test repo for Gear Up. And okay, so now you want to do public probably for Gear Up people. So that way people can see the repo. So Gear people can see the repo. We can see the repo, etc. This will just be good. Eventually you can change it at the end or whatever, so this can be, but let's just leave it public for now. Add a README file. This is just kind of for what the project is, what the program does, explaining how to use it. So this is just overall a good thing to have in general. So kind of get in the habit of having a README and filling it in and kind of explaining it. You can look at other projects on GitHub and other places of example READMEs of like, okay, what kind of things you want to save, maybe formatting, things like that. That information is widely available. Then we can do Git Ignore. This will just remove a lot of files that we don't need. And since we are, I think for Gear Up, we're just going to use Unity. So you can just search for Unity in here and use that as your Git Ignore template. All the files are going to be like not saved on GitHub, letting you have safe space. And Unity, if it needs it, it will just recreate the thing when you open it up. So you're not like missing out on the features or anything like that. So it's just a better way of keeping your GitHub repository cleaner. Choose license. We don't really need to worry about this as much. If we need to, we'll get into that later, but you shouldn't need a license here. Then you can just create a repository and you'll have your repo here. So now you see we have your README, which we can go into. We can even edit it. Be like, oh, hello. And yeah, so we can just do that. So I'm just going to go back. I don't want to save it. But let's kind of look at what this repo kind of does. So like I said, we have our file. We can edit it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to edit every file because some of them are readable, some of them are not readable. But we can look at a few other things like issues, which you probably shouldn't worry about. Pull requests, you shouldn't really worry about until you get into merges, which Aaron will also go into. Actions, you probably won't need to worry about. Some of these are just hosting it from different places, some other things like that. Projects, shouldn't need to worry about this. Some of these stuff you really need to worry about, but sometimes it's kind of cool to kind of look through and see inside. You can kind of see if you have multiple accounts for different students. You can kind of see who's doing the most work, who's contributing, who's not contributing, things like that. Some just data analytics type stuff. So look at that. This account's done a lot. And if we go to settings, we can do somewhat of a cool thing. Some options and stuff, but there's a thing called pages. So this isn't as relevant for your Gear Up project, but if anyone wants to like dabble in like HTML, CSS, some other things. They can just make their own page and kind of get practice with that on your own time, type of a thing. Just do main branch, save. Yeah, I don't want a custom domain, but yeah. So there's some cool things you can do with this. I won't really go into it now. This is not quite the focus, but there's a lot of cool things you can do at GitHub. It's going to be your main source for your online cloud type hosting or storage for your files for programming stuff. It's going to be very good for you. And yep, we'll move on to making changes to a repo next.
All right, now that Brandon showed you how to set up your GitHub account, download the GitHub Desktop App, and create your first repo, I'm going to show you how to use it. You'll notice that mine looks a little bit different, even though I am in the same repository that Brandon created, and that's just because I'm in dark mode, and I was also working on the project earlier. I actually found a problem with the Git Ignore file that I'm glad I discovered, because now I can show you how to fix it. So I'll go over that in just a little bit. The first thing that you'll want to do, if you haven't already, is log in to your GitHub account on the actual GitHub Desktop app. Once you've done that, you'll be prompted to connect a repository or clone something from your account. Mine looks, again, a little different because I was working on this earlier and I deleted it off of my computer so I could show you how to clone it. Go back to the GitHub website and make sure you're in your repo under the code section. Go over to this green code button, click the drop-down arrow, and select Open with GitHub Desktop. Confirm that. And yours should probably start downloading on its own, or you might just need to confirm it. I'm going to hit clone again, and it will start downloading. While that's downloading, I want to show you where this is going to end up. By default, GitHub creates its own root folder inside of your Documents folder on your PC. You'll see here I have quite a few projects in here because I've used GitHub for a while. You should only have one folder if you've used it for the first time, and that's the repo that we just created. I'll go into that. And you can see that it has the same files in this folder that exist here in the code on the website. That's another thing that I recommend doing too, is right when you download the project, anytime you pull from main when you're first starting a work session on the project, just double check and make sure that you have the most current version and that it did download correctly, because there have been times where I wasn't getting all the files necessary and I had to delete the whole repo and then clone it again. So it is an easy fix, but it's also easy to miss. So make sure that you double check that you have the correct files. Now, I want to explain the problem that happened with the Git Ignore and what I'll do and I'll really just demonstrate it happening and how I solved it. If you open up your Git Ignore, it'll prompt you for some sort of text editor like Word or Notepad to be used for it. I defaulted to Notepad. This is what you should see when you open it up. It is a lot of gobbledygook if you're not used to seeing this sort of stuff. Don't worry too much. The thing that we have to focus on are these little slashes in this section of the Git Ignore. These little slashes are what we're going to end up getting rid of when we fix this Git Ignore. But I want to show you what happens if you don't do that. And if you don't have these slashes, then don't worry about it. And if you're not having the issue that I'm having, then also don't worry about it. This is just if we find that the Git Ignore is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. I'm going to go ahead and create a new Unity project. I'm going to open up Unity Hub. Using Unity Hub is a best practice, in my opinion, just because it's a lot easier to control. Unity does a lot of updates, and Unity Hub gives you an opportunity to save the version of Unity that you start your project in, just in case it updates and screws things up. So I really recommend using that. The reason I removed that from the list is because while I was working on the project earlier, I was encountering those issues I mentioned, and the project no longer exists in that folder. So I wanted to go ahead and remove it before I create it once more. I'm going to go up here to New, and I'll go ahead and do a 3D one. Doesn't really matter. It's just for the sake of the test. Test repo project. Now, the location is very important when using Unity with GitHub, especially when you're first creating the project. You'll notice that mine automatically defaults to the GitHub folder into that repo folder because I was working in this earlier. If it doesn't, you'll just want to hit those 3 dots and make sure you go to your documents, go to GitHub, and find that repo folder, have that selected before you proceed. Now we'll hit create. And just watch the GitHub Desktop App as well. The app is really good to have open while you're working because it will keep track of all of the changes that you're making as they happen. And with the Git Ignore issue, you'll understand why that's important. All right. So you can see the Unity project was successfully created, and now over 4,600 files have been created according to the GitHub Desktop App. And this is exactly what we want to avoid with the Git Ignore file. If you find this many files when you first create your project in the GitHub folder, you know that your Git Ignore needs to be adjusted because only about 30 files should have been created. So what I'm going to do is close out of this project. And a cool thing that you can do with the app is that you can actually discard all those changes without actually having to go into the folder and delete everything yourself. So I will right-click up at the top here, discard all changes, and I will confirm that I'd like to do that. And you'll notice it takes a little while just because thousands of files were created, so thousands of files need to be discarded. Imagine trying to push thousands of files to your website each time you wanted to do a small update to the project. It would take a really long time. Actually, since this is taking a second, I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel, and I'm going to go here and delete it myself. There we go. And now because all of the changes that we just made were undone, GitHub Desktop will register that no changes have occurred. So now we can go back to our Git Ignore and fix that problem. So again, just the part you'll want to pay attention to is this first little chunk. These slashes all need to be deleted. Make sure to be very careful not to delete anything else, but just those little slashes in front of the words here. And how that works is a little bit too complicated for me to explain. I just know that it solved my problem. So I hit Control S, and I'm going to go ahead and exit out. You'll notice I have one changed file, so I will go ahead and push that to main. You'll notice down here, and it might be a little different for you, it defaulted to writing a little summary update in the title here of the change that I just made. If it doesn't show up for you and no text is in the title or the description, this commit to main will not be available to you. And that's just because GitHub needs to have some sort of summary or description in order to keep track of all the various changes that you're pushing to the GitHub cloud on your repo. So since I only changed one file, it defaults to updated Git Ignore. So I'll go ahead and commit to main. And you'll notice that I have this push origin up here that I need to press. And what that'll do is it will actually begin the process of transferring my files to the repo on the website. Go to the website, hit refresh, and you'll see that the latest change I just made is up here, update Git Ignore. All right. So now that we've adjusted our Git Ignore, we can actually go about creating our Unity project. So I will open up Unity Hub again. And again, I will want to remove the test repo project from the list because that project no longer exists. And I will hit New, 3D, Test Repo Project. It is in the correct folder. I will hit Create. I will pay attention to the GitHub Desktop App once more. All right. As you can see, I only have 23 changed files currently. So far, so good. That is a lot more manageable than 4,600 changes. So I showed you how to fix the Git Ignore issue if you do encounter that. But one more thing I want to explain is that it's really important for you to create your Unity project inside the GitHub repo folder. This test repo 2 folder in my case, I wanted to create it in this folder. Otherwise, this Git Ignore would not read the Unity project and it would completely disregard it. So just make sure that if you haven't started your Unity project yet, you go ahead and create it inside of the repository folder. That way the Git Ignore will register. And of course, you'll want to make sure that you fix your Git Ignore if you find that you're pushing thousands of files. All right, so now we've got our Unity project. We've got everything connected to our repo, and all the initial setup is basically done. Now I'm going to go through the step-by-step process that I use each time I work with GitHub with a team project, just because I've encountered a lot of errors and I'd really like to save you some headache, so this is a process I found that really works. The first step is that I want to communicate with my peers about what they're working on and what I plan to work on. This is a very, very important step when you're using GitHub with Unity. No two people can work on the same script or scene at the same time. If you do, you'll find that you get merge conflicts, and you can mess up your whole project, and you'll need to revert it back to an earlier version where those changes weren't made. So definitely keep that in mind. One thing that I like to do, just as a catch-all, is I'll go ahead and while I'm in the Unity project, and I want to, say I want to create a little playable character that runs around. Well, that's not something I need to do in this main scene here. I can go ahead and go up to File and hit New Scene. I'll create a basic one, and now I have my own unique scene. So I can make all of my changes here and not have to worry about messing up the main scene of the project where other people might be working on stuff. That's just a good little measure, I think. But again, make sure you're communicating with your peers about what you're working on and what they're working on. That way you don't end up working on the same thing and messing up each other's work. I'm going to go ahead and push these changes before we move on. Okay. Now we can move on to step 2, which is to open up the GitHub Desktop App. And I've already done this, but just for the sake of stating it again, what you'll want to do is to make sure you're in the correct repo, make sure you're on main, and then you're going to want to pull from main to get the latest changes from the project. Step 3 is to go up here to the current branch, hit the drop-down arrow, and you'll see this button that lets you create a new branch. I recommend naming your branch with your name in it so your teammates know who's doing what. So in my case, I will call this Aaron Branch, and then I'll create branch. And just like when you're pushing changes, you'll want to, after you've told the app, yes, I'd like to make that change, you actually have to push that change to the website. So in this case, you'll need to publish your branch. Now, if I were to go back to the website, reload my repo page, Instead of just one branch, I have 2 branches now. I've got main and Aaron branch. So everything's working out. Step 4 is to just go about making whatever changes you'd like to the project. Just occasionally checking in on the GitHub Desktop App. Anytime I see that I have over 100 files changed or 200, I go ahead and push my changes to the branch. Still in my unique branch, of course, but it's easier when working with GitHub if you make several smaller pushes than one big push when you're all done. That's part of why that Git Ignore issue was so important. In this case, I'll go ahead and make a small change and make a push. I'll create a little cube in my Unity scene. Control S to save my scene, test scene, save, and now I should be able to see a couple of changes over in my desktop app. And I do. I have 2 changed files. Test, push. All right, push origin. Step 5. Once I'm done working on the project for now, I will make one last push to the branch. In this case, I don't need to. But then I'll create a pull request. I'll go down here and hit this blue button. And this is how I'm going to merge the changes that I just made onto the main branch. It should prompt me right here, taking me to this page. Test push, and then I'll create a pull request. GitHub is then going to be checking for any conflicts, and as you can see, this branch has no conflicts with the base branch. If you find you have merge conflicts, you'll definitely want to get those sorted before trying to merge over to main, otherwise you can screw up your project. So I'll go ahead and merge pull request, and then confirm the merge. And there we go. Step 6 is very important. You can see this prompt here telling me that my pull request has successfully been merged and closed, and I'm all set. My Aaron branch can be safely deleted. And you do not want to forget this step. Delete my branch. One thing you'll want to make sure you do after you've deleted your branch on the actual GitHub cloud is to also delete it in your local GitHub Desktop app. So go back over to the main branch, go to the down arrow, right-click your branch, and delete. And just in case the deletion didn't register on the remote, go ahead and hit that checkbox, and it'll just double-check and make sure that it deletes the one on the website too. Go back to the website, refresh. And yep, we only have one branch, so we are good to go. The reason this is so important is because my branch was a copy of the current main branch before I added my changes. Say I were to leave my branch open after I finished the changes I just made. In the meantime, my teammates start pushing their changes over to the main branch. If I were to open my still existing branch and continue doing new changes and work, then I were to try to merge over with main, I'd be overwriting my teammates' work. So that's why it's really important for me to delete the branch each time I merge it with the main one. Whenever you start your next work session, just make sure that you have the main branch selected, fetch/pull origin, and then you can make your own branch to start working again, because you'll have all of the new updates from your teammates. Step 7 is the same as step 1, which is to communicate all of the changes that I made to my peers so that they can pull from main if they plan to work on the project soon. GitHub is not a substitute for communicating with your group. It's very important that you let your team know when they should update their main branch with your changes and when you're working on a particular scene or script in Unity. All right, that's really all I had to show you. I hope it was helpful, and good luck with your projects.
Thank you for watching. Good luck.